The White House was unusually quiet that morning. Donald Trump, now deep into his presidency, had been informed of an unusual request. A small group of monks from Tibet had arrived in Washington, invited by an international cultural exchange program. Normally, such visits were routine, but this one was different. Among them was an elderly monk said to have spent decades in meditation and silence, speaking only when truly necessary. Trump, curious but pressed for time, considered declining the meeting. Yet something about the monk's presence in the city drew his attention. His aides described him as humble yet commanding, the kind of man who could hold a room without uttering a word. When the monk entered the Oval Office, his steps were slow, his robe faded, and his smile quiet yet profound. He bowed gently, and for a moment, Trump, so used to commanding attention, felt a strange stillness wash over the room. The monk didn't come with political demands or cultural speeches. Instead, he reached into his robe and held out a small folded note written on worn parchment. Trump raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" he asked, expecting a diplomatic message or perhaps a ceremonial gift. But the monk only smiled and said in soft, accented English, "These are words you are meant to read. Not now, but when the moment feels heavy." Trump, skeptical yet intrigued, slipped the note into his jacket pocket. He didn't realize then that the message would not only shake his beliefs, but also stir a journey he never imagined taking. For the first time in years, Trump felt a flicker of curiosity stronger than politics. The rest of the monk's visit was uneventful by political standards. The group offered blessings, posed for photographs, and shared quiet stories about their monastery. Trump nodded politely, but his mind kept drifting back to the folded note tucked inside his pocket. That evening, while preparing for a rally, he almost unfolded it. Almost. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the monk's words, "When the moment feels heavy." Heavy moments weren't new to him. He had faced criticism, challenges, and tough decisions. Yet, this note seemed to suggest something deeper. As the rally crowd roared his name, Trump delivered his speech with the usual fire. But between applause breaks, he caught himself wondering, what could possibly be written on that paper that a monk thought I should read? Later that night, lying in bed, Melania noticed his restlessness. "Donald, you keep turning. What's wrong?" He hesitated, then admitted that monk today, he gave me a note. Said, "I know when to open it." Melania smiled faintly. "Then don't force it. If it's meant for you, the right moment will come." Trump exhaled, trying to brush it off. But deep inside, he felt something unusual, like destiny had dropped a pebble into the still waters of his life, sending ripples he couldn't yet understand. He kept the note close, carrying it in his suit jacket the next morning. And though he didn't open it, he found himself glancing at it often. It wasn't just a note anymore. It was a mystery waiting to be solved. A few weeks later, Trump was scheduled to give a speech at a veterans hospital. The air was heavy with expectation as many of the attendees were wounded soldiers and grieving families. Trump, usually confident on stage, felt an unfamiliar weight in his chest as he approached the podium. He looked at the rows of men and women in wheelchairs, some missing limbs, others scarred by battles most Americans never heard about. Their silent stares pierced deeper than any words. For once, his usual rhetoric didn't seem enough. As he began to speak, his voice faltered. "You have given so much, more than most can imagine." His throat tightened. He reached into his pocket, instinctively touching the folded note. His hand lingered there. A strange calm spread through him, almost urging him to finally read it. But standing before the crowd, he couldn't. Not yet. One young soldier in the front row caught his eye. A man with burned scars across his face, saluting with his only remaining arm. Trump's words froze. He had faced audiences worldwide, but never one that made him feel so powerless. The monk's words echoed in his mind. When the moment feels heavy, Trump finished his speech with difficulty, but his heart wasn't in the applause that followed. Later, as his motorcade drove away, he leaned back in his seat, staring at the ceiling. Something told him the moment the monk spoke of was getting closer. That night, Trump couldn't sleep. Memories he hadn't thought about in decades resurfaced. His father's strict discipline, the lessons of ambition and power. The moments of doubt he never admitted publicly. He walked into his study alone and took out the note. He held it under the lamp, but didn't unfold it yet. He whispered to himself, "What am I afraid of?" He thought of his childhood, his father teaching him to be tough, to never show weakness. He remembered how even as a boy, emotions were something to hide, not express. Success was measured in buildings, businesses, and headlines, not in quiet reflection. But the monk's serene face haunted him. Why had the man chosen him? Why not a senator, a scholar, or a spiritual leader? As dawn approached, Trump finally placed the note back in the drawer, still unopened. His pride resisted. If the words inside were simple or foolish, he would feel ridiculous for giving them such weight. And yet, a small voice inside whispered, "What if those words matter more than anything else you've heard?" He poured himself coffee and stared at the sunrise. For the first time in years, Donald Trump felt vulnerable. Not because of politics, but because of one fragile, folded piece of paper. A week later, Trump returned to the same veterans' hospital for a private visit. This time, without cameras, he walked through the halls quietly. He stopped beside the young soldier he had noticed earlier, the one with burn scars. The soldier looked up at him and asked, "Mr. President, was it worth it? What we gave up?" Trump froze. No one had ever asked him that so directly. His usual words felt empty. He wanted to give comfort, but truthfully, he didn't know how to answer. He shook the man's hand, his throat tight, and said only, "Your sacrifice will never be forgotten." But as he walked away, guilt gnawed at him. He realized power wasn't about speeches. It was about carrying the weight of people's pain. That night, back at the White House, he pulled out the monk's note again. His hand trembled on the edge of the fold, but he stopped muttering, "Not yet." For the first time, Trump admitted to himself that he didn't have all the answers. And maybe, just maybe, the monk's words held something he desperately needed. Trump's son, Barron, had been watching his father closely. One evening, as they shared dinner, Barron asked, "Dad, do you ever feel tired? Not from work, but inside." The question startled Trump. He looked at his teenage son and saw something he rarely noticed. Genuine concern. "Why do you ask that?" Trump replied, "Because sometimes you look like you're carrying a lot more than you say." Trump didn't answer right away. He thought of the monk's serene smile. He thought of the folded note. Finally, he admitted softly, "Maybe I am." Barron leaned forward. "Then maybe you need to hear something different, something real?" The words struck him. His son, in his own way, was pushing him closer to the note. For years, Trump had built walls of strength and confidence, but even his own child could see through them. After dinner, Trump went to his study. He placed the note on his desk, staring at it for a long time. He was closer than ever to opening it. But again, he waited. Deep down, he knew the timing still wasn't right. A fierce storm hit Washington that night, rattling the windows of the White House. Trump sat alone, the monk's note in hand, listening to the howling wind. He felt as if nature itself was pushing him toward a decision. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room. Trump unfolded the note halfway, then stopped again. Why was he so afraid of a few words? He was a man who faced world leaders, who endured criticism daily, and yet this small slip of paper terrified him. His mind raced. What if the words reveal my weakness? What if they change how I see everything? The storm grew louder. Trump closed his eyes, gripping the note tightly. He whispered to himself, "I'll know when it's time." At that exact moment, the storm eased. The rain softened to a gentle patter. Trump took it as a sign, not to open it just yet, but that the right moment was indeed approaching. For the first time, he felt that the note wasn't a burden. It was a gift waiting for the right hour to be unwrapped. The following week, Trump visited a children's hospital. Among the patients was a little girl no older than 8, her head wrapped in a scarf from chemotherapy. She smiled brightly as he entered the room. "Mr. President," she said weakly, "thank you for coming. It makes me happy." Trump knelt beside her bed, touched by her innocence. "You're the brave one," he told her. She handed him a crayon drawing of a sunrise. "This is for you to remind you that every day starts new." The simplicity of her words pierced him deeper than any political speech. He left the hospital with the drawing in his pocket right next to the monk's note. That night, he placed both items side by side on his desk, a child's picture, a monk's words, both waiting for him to truly listen. Trump realized that sometimes the most powerful lessons came from those who had nothing to gain, only truth to share. The weight inside him grew heavier. He knew the day was near. That night, Trump dreamt of the monk. In the dream, the old man stood on a mountaintop, holding the note out to him. Around them, the world was silent. "Why wait?"
Trump asked.
The monk only replied, "Because you're not listening yet." Trump woke with a start, sweat on his forehead. He sat up, confused and restless. What did the dream mean? Was it his subconscious or something greater? He walked to the window and stared at the city lights. Power, wealth, influence, all things he had fought for his entire life suddenly felt small compared to the weight of that note. For the first time, Trump admitted he didn't want to face the truth inside it. Because deep down he knew it might demand something of him, something he wasn't ready to give. But destiny, it seemed, was patient. During a charity dinner, Trump met a priest who had worked in war zones. The man spoke of losing friends, of comforting children who had no parents left. "You know what? I've learned," the priest said softly, "that words are not just words. They can heal or they can wound. And sometimes one sentence can change a man's entire path." Trump felt the monk's note burn in his pocket. He smiled politely, but inside his heart pounded. Later that evening, when the room had emptied, Trump sat alone at the grand table, staring at his reflection in a half-empty glass of water. He pulled out the note again. His fingers trembled as he unfolded it slightly more than before, but once again he stopped. Something told him that the right moment was still just ahead. He could feel it. The next morning, Trump attended a meeting on national security. Generals and advisors filled the room, voices tense as they debated strategy. Trump listened, but his mind wandered. Every statistic, every projection, behind it were human lives. For the first time, he didn't just hear numbers. He saw faces. The wounded veteran, the little girl with cancer, the priest's quiet eyes. The weight of leadership pressed on him harder than ever. As the meeting ended, one general approached him privately. "Sir, sometimes the hardest thing is not making the strongest choice, but the most compassionate one." Trump nodded slowly. Compassion. It was a word he didn't use often, yet it echoed like a drum beat in his chest. Later that night, he pulled the note from his pocket once more. He traced its edges, realizing the moment was coming closer. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was readying himself. That evening, Melania found him in the study, staring at the note again. She walked over, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. "You've been carrying this for weeks, Donald. What are you waiting for?"
He sighed.
"The right moment." She smiled softly. "Sometimes the right moment isn't given. Sometimes you must choose it." Her words struck him deeply. Melania had always been quiet, but in her silence was wisdom. He realized he had been waiting for destiny to push him when perhaps it was his responsibility to step forward. He kissed her forehead, whispering, "Maybe you're right." That night, he placed the note on his nightstand. It was the closest he had come to opening it. He promised himself very soon he would. On a rural trip, Trump visited farmers struggling with drought. An old farmer shook his hand and said, "We don't ask for much just to know someone hears us." Those words hit hard. Trump had heard countless voices, yet had he truly listened? Driving back, he thought about the monk's timing. Perhaps the note wasn't about politics or leadership at all. Perhaps it was about the human side of everything, listening, not commanding. He remembered the little girl's drawing, the veteran's question, Barron's concern. The universe was speaking to him through ordinary people. The note, he realized, was simply the final piece. One night, a sudden international crisis unfolded. Trump sat in the Situation Room, advisors pressing for decisions. Tension thickened the air. As he weighed the options, he reached into his jacket and touched the folded note. For the first time, he wished he had read it. But even without opening it, he felt a strange calm. The monk's presence seemed to whisper, "Choose with compassion." He made his decision. Not the harshest, not the easiest, but the one that spared lives while maintaining strength. Hours later, when the crisis eased, Trump realized something extraordinary. The note was already guiding him, even unopened. A few days later, Barron entered his father's office quietly. "Dad," he said, holding up the little girl's drawing of the sunrise. "You keep this here, don't you?" Trump nodded. "Then maybe it's time you read the note, too." Trump chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "You really want me to, don't you?" Barron nodded seriously. "I think you need it." Trump realized his son wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a voice of conscience, urging him toward the truth he had been avoiding. That night, Trump held both the drawing and the note. He whispered, "Tomorrow." Trump received word that the monk who had given him the note was leaving the United States. Before departing, the monk requested a brief meeting. In the quiet of the White House garden, Trump met him once more. The monk bowed, eyes filled with gentle knowing. "Have you read the words?" he asked softly. Trump shook his head. "Not yet. But I feel them." The monk smiled. "Then you are already closer than you think. When you open it, you will understand, not with your mind, but with your heart." Trump felt tears prick his eyes, something rare for him. He bowed his head slightly, whispering, "Thank you." That night, Trump sat alone in the Oval Office. No cameras, no aides, just silence. The weight of his life, the victories, the battles, the burdens hung over him. He placed the note on the resolute desk. His hand trembled as he finally unfolded it. Slowly, carefully, there in delicate handwriting were just 5 simple words. The note read, "Power is nothing without love." Trump stared at the words, his chest tightening. 5 words, yet they pierced deeper than any speech, any book, any policy. Images flashed before him. The scarred veteran, the little girl, the farmer, Barron's worried eyes. He whispered aloud, "Power is nothing without love." Tears rolled down his face. He realized the monk had not given him advice on ruling a nation. He had given him a key to ruling himself. From that day forward, something shifted in Trump. He still led firmly, still spoke boldly, but there was a softness beneath his words, a genuine care people began to notice. When he spoke to veterans, he didn't just thank them. He listened. When he visited hospitals, he didn't just pose for photos. He stayed, asked, and remembered names. Melania noticed. Barron noticed. Even his critics noticed. Something in him had changed. And though no one else knew about the note, Trump carried it always, tucked in his jacket, a silent reminder of the lesson he had nearly ignored. Years later, long after that presidency ended, Trump was invited to speak at a school. A child asked, "What's the most important lesson you ever learned?" He smiled, pulling out the fragile piece of parchment worn with time. He read the words aloud to the children. "Power is nothing without love." The room fell silent. Trump's voice broke slightly as he added, "These 5 words changed my life. And if you remember them, they may change yours, too." The monk's note had done its work, not through politics, but through the transformation of a man who learned that true strength wasn't in towers or titles, but in the love one carried for others. And in that moment, every person listening felt the truth of